Hi everyone, it's Katie Crysdale here from Lakeview Aquatic Consultants. In this video, I'm going to talk about how I personally prepare for the National Lifeguard Recert, and I'm going to give you some tips and tricks if this is your first NL Recert, or if you're nervous about your National Lifeguard Recert, what you can expect in terms of the curriculum and the items that are required. So as a little bit of background, I've been certified as a national lifeguard for over 20 years at this point. I was first certified when I turned 16 back in 2003 in Ontario. I have completed my national lifeguard recert every 2 years for most of the last 20 years. The only time I really missed it was the couple of years that I went to graduate school overseas in Israel, and I let my certification lapse. But I would also say that with the different jobs I've held at different pools over the years, I have participated in extra recertifications, either as a volunteer, as a backup lifeguard, to assist my colleagues or friends who were also doing their recerts. So I would say that I have myself participated in over 10 NL recerts at this point. I am also a National Lifeguard Instructor and a National Lifeguard Instructor Trainer here in Alberta and the Northwest Territories Lifesaving branch. Nothing in this video is anything other than my personal opinion. My opinions are not endorsed by the Lifesaving Society, nor do they represent the perspective of the Lifesaving Society, but I am happy to share my experience as somebody who is also conducted many National Lifeguard Instructor original classes, as well as recerts, as well as running different staff in-service training when I was a pool manager, in addition to wet screens. So when I would hire different lifeguards, we would conduct a lot of the same NL core standard skills. We would evaluate those for new hires or prospective employment candidates. So in this video, I'm going to talk more about my personal process for preparing for the National Lifeguard Recert. I mention all of this because I am not a former competitive swimmer. I do not currently work at a pool, so I don't have a home pool that I go to 3 or 4 days a week to lifeguard. I work primarily out of my office, and so I am sitting on my butt a lot. I don't have the same stamina as somebody who used to work in and around pools on my feet for 8 hours a day. And so a lot of the preparation that I'm doing this summer for my National Lifeguard Recert this fall is because of that sedentary lifestyle that I currently have. And I know a lot of people who may have roles such as a swim coach or maybe a preschool swim instructor, maybe somebody who's in more of an administrative position, such as a pool programmer or pool supervisor. They may feel the same way about their concern to do well in an upcoming National Lifeguard Recert, but they don't necessarily know where to start. Or if this is your first time going to a National Lifeguard Recert because you were certified as a lifeguard during the pandemic or very recently, you may not know what to expect. And so that's what I want to talk about in this video. So I want to start by talking about the physical standards that are going to be required during your National Lifeguard Recert. The National Lifeguard Program is a national program here in Canada, but the individual branches, the individual provinces may have some variations in the way they administer the recertification. So speaking as a National Lifeguard Instructor here in Alberta, the minimum course time is recommended at 4 hours, and more time will be required if you have a larger number of candidates or you have any extra elements that you are testing, not for the National Lifeguard Recert, but maybe it is combined with a pre-employment screening or an on-the-job assessment. So let's have a quick look at what those items are. Then I'm going to talk through what you can expect from those items. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about my process for preparing for my National Lifeguard Recert, which is coming up here in 2 months. So in terms of the National Lifeguard Program, the National Lifeguard Program, the original course is a 40-hour course that you took, and that is comprised of standard modules, standard core information that you need to know, and then it is focused on a particular area. So this video is going to be focused on the National Lifeguard Pool recertification. I am not qualified to speak to waterfront, water park, or surf NL programs. For the pool recert, including the revisions that occurred in 2022, the objects that you will be required to complete during your 4-hour NL pool recert include the object recovery, which some people call the brick, the 50-meter sprint challenge, the 400-meter endurance challenge, and then skills such as scanning and observation, management of a distressed or a drowning victim, management of a submerged non-breathing victim, management of an injured victim, lifeguard situations as a single lifeguard, and lifeguard situations as part of a team. If some of these titles or headings sound a little bit different, it is because there were program revisions that did come out in 2022. One of the big ones I can speak to as a National Lifeguard instructor is that shift in lifeguard situations. Item 12 is now split into single guard versus team. So we'll talk a little bit more about those when we get to them in this video, but I wanted to stress that if you've been around lifeguarding for a long time, some of the terminology has changed in the lessons and the award book items, and then also some of the specific criteria has changed when it comes to individual items. And we will see that specifically in my mind when we get to the sprint challenge. So in this video, I'm not going to be able to share on the screen all of the detailed performance criteria for each of the individual National Lifeguard Award items. And I'm also not going to be able to put on the screen the detailed lesson plans because those are proprietary intellectual property items from the Lifesaving Society. But I do want to assure you that I do have my award guide handy, and I am speaking as somebody who has taught these program items many, many times over the last 10 years as both a National Lifeguard Instructor, National Lifeguard Instructor Trainer, who's often done many co-teaches. So the information I'm sharing in this video is factual as of July of 2024. Your exact recertification may have some small variations depending on the branch, so the individual province or territory where your recert is taking place. There also are some small variations person to person, instructor to instructor, as well as there may be some variations in the type of pool where your recert is taking place. There are going to be variations in whether you do the brick recovered from the bottom of your local community pool, which might have a maximum depth of 1.5 or 2 meters, as compared to the Olympic pool at a college or university, which might have a depth of 3 or 4 meters. So the first item I want to talk about is the one that causes a lot of stress for different candidates, both for recertification as well as lifeguard candidates in an original course. And that first item that's part of the National Lifeguard Pool recertification is the object recovery, aka the brick, item 6B. So when we think about the brick, you completing the brick should not be substantially different from what you did in your original course. We are talking about a 20-pound brick that is recovered from the bottom of the pool. There is a minimum depth of 1.5 meters, and then there is a maximum depth of 3 meters unless there is some sort of occupational requirement, like I mentioned earlier, when it comes to a deeper pool, deeper dive tank that is required as part of your employment standard, not part of your NL standard. So the brick needs to be recovered within 40 seconds. It does include an in-water approach. So you're starting with a swim of 15 meters. So you swim 15 meters. You are then going to descend via head first or foot first surface dive. You are going to collect the brick with your hands. You are going to come to the surface, and then you are going to keep your jawline out of the water for the 5 meters that you are transporting that 20-pound brick to the side of the pool. You are not required to put the brick on the edge of the pool. You are not required to have the brick out of the water. You are simply required to have your jawline out. And I describe this to candidates as not breathing through a straw. So we should not see water and just a straw sucking action. We should see that you are comfortably, you've got your jawline out, whether that is your head upright in an egg beater fashion, or whether that is a little bit laid back in the water where the water is below the jawline and that you are able to comfortably breathe. All of this, the approach, the descent, the surface, and the carry all needs to be completed within 40 seconds. That's a pretty generous amount of time in my experience as a National Lifeguard instructor. Many people get to the brick within the first 20 seconds, allowing them a further 20 seconds to really focus on their technique, descend safely, ascend safely with a good squat push off the bottom, and then carrying the brick in a manner, whether it is against their chest, held in their arm, on their shoulder, whatever that looks like, in order to get it to the side of the pool. A life-saving kick is strongly encouraged. So an egg beater, a scissor kick, a whip kick, but you can honestly do whatever meets the purpose of the skill. So that is the first physical standard that is required from your NL recert. The second physical standard is the sprint challenge, which is known as item 6C in the award guide. The sprint challenge is one of the program items that recently changed in the 2022 revision. So for a lot of us, myself included, because I was never a competitive swimmer, the sprint challenge was one that I definitely had to train for a little bit, because it did require me to really hustle, and I would be not struggling to achieve the standard, but I would be right up against the limit. So the sprint challenge requires an in-water start as well. You cannot do a dive entry, and it does require that you complete a 50-meter sprint, so usually out and back, in the course of 60 seconds. What has substantially changed in the last 2 years is that it is no longer required to be a head-up swim. So the current sprint challenge does allow you to have your face in. It does allow you to use goggles. And so it is turning it into a 50-meter straight sprint instead of a head-up sprint. And so I know, speaking for myself, my head-up swim where my legs are dragging through the water, I was definitely a 55 seconds, 56 seconds, 57 seconds kind of lady, right up against the limit. I would make the limit, but it would be a struggle definitely in the last 10 or 12 meters to get to the wall with the right amount of time. So the current standard is any recognizable combination of strokes. The strokes are not evaluated, but the time standard must be met, so 60 seconds. So I know for me, in preparing for my NL recert in September of 2024, it's really nice to know that the training that I do for my endurance swim will also carry over now to the sprint challenge. I don't need to spend extra time working on the sprint challenge, i.e. head-up swimming. The next physical item that you will need to complete during your National Lifeguard Pool recertification is the endurance challenge. The endurance challenge has not substantively changed in the last 2 years. The big changes to the program were about 10 or 12 years ago, when the total length went down to 400 meters in 10 minutes. This is a very standard physical challenge. It should be very easy for people to do. As I would say to any person who is working in a pool job, you should be easily able to complete this in under 10 minutes. You should not be struggling to end your swim at 9:58, 9:59. And I know for me, at the fittest that I was ever as a younger lifeguard, I was doing it in 7:20, 7:15. We're talking 400 meters, which is not a significant distance, and you have 10 minutes to complete that. You are allowed to do flip turns. You are allowed to do a diving entry. You are allowed to mix up your strokes. So you could do one length of front crawl and then rest with one length of back crawl or one length of breaststroke. You just have to complete the distance in the period of time. It is important to have your own benchmark. So I know for me, 20 years into being a lifeguard, 7:20 would be a realistic timeline if I was continuously swimming, working at a pool day to day, teaching lessons all the time. But given my age, my sedentary lifestyle, that my preferred activities at this point are things like hot yoga and spin class, I am very comfortable if my time is under 8 minutes and 20 seconds, and I'm not dying. So for me to prepare for my National Lifeguard recertification this summer, I am ensuring that I go and I swim at least once per week for 600 or 700 meters. That is not a lot of training. For some people, that may not be enough, But for me, with my lifestyle in terms of doing other physical activities, 1 swim per week or 8 to 10 swims in the next few weeks before my recert is enough to get me into shape. That may not be the case for you. Other people may require more time to get back into shape with swimming, but the distance that you need to complete is 400 meters in 10 minutes, and there were not any changes during the 2022 revision. Last 6 items that you will need to do as part of your National Lifeguard recertification are going to be your knowledge items, and they are demonstrated through situations or scenarios and rescues, different activities. So you need to be able to demonstrate your knowledge of lifeguard skill 8B, which is your scanning and observation. So you need to be able to demonstrate that you can scan a pool area and you can observe the behaviors of the bathers in that pool area. So some specific items that come to mind include a systematic scanning pattern with observable head movement, continuous scan of designated supervision zone, including the pool bottom and all portions of the water column, quick, accurate recognition, analysis of potential incident, vigilant, attentive, and alert demeanor, and then recognition of communication with other lifeguards. So this will be done as part of your scenarios, and the scenarios you'll be presented with by your National Lifeguard Instructor conducting the recertification must include the management of a distressed or drowning victim, must include the management of a submerged and non-breathing victim, must also include the management of injured victims, and then other types of scenarios are permitted during the general lifeguard situations where you are either a single guard or you are working as part of the team. Speaking broadly, when we are looking at these knowledge items, each individual skill does have its each performance criteria, which is showcased in the award guide. I mentioned that I can't provide the complete text of the award guide in this video because it is intellectual property of the Lifesaving Society, but I can speak generally that you are going to need to show your lifeguard positioning, your rotation. You do need to be able to show that you're able to communicate in the case of an emergency, that you have first aid knowledge, that you're responding promptly with an aid, that you're using the ladder approach to progressively think about how you are addressing the situation in terms of there being one victim or two, one rescuer or multiple rescuers. What is the pool environment? Is it a minor or a major emergency? What other people do you have available to assist you in terms of backup lifeguards or bystanders or other roles in the facility, such as a customer service rep, such as a maintenance person or an admin staff? You do need to have correct knowledge of your first aid. So what will you do if you're dealing with a bee sting, if you're dealing with a choking victim, if you're dealing with someone who requires CPR? What does that look like in terms of your personal protective equipment? What does that look like in terms of other resources, such as asking for a blanket when you treat for shock, asking for an AED, asking for gloves and pocket mask, asking for key information about the victim or the casualty in terms of, does anyone know this person? Was there any recent medical incidents, or did they eat today? Have they taken any medication? Who are they at the facility with? So these are all basic things that will be rolled into your lifeguard situations broadly, as well as into the individual scenarios where you do need to have knowledge of individual types of victims that are common in a pool environment. If you are still very nervous about your National Lifeguard Pool recert, I would encourage you to download the recertification guide that is available as a study guide for anybody who is preparing for their NL recertification. I will link to that in the video description. In general, when it comes to any sort of recertification, whether it is a lifeguard role or a swim instructor role, first aid instructor role, standard pieces of information I would give to anybody who's very nervous is to prepare or to start to prepare well in advance. This is not something you prepare for a few days before. This is something you should mark on your calendar at least 3 months in advance and start chipping away at the knowledge pieces or the physical fitness items if you are nervous about it. talk about preparing for the recertification with a buddy at work, if you have one, or somebody who you can rely on to keep you accountable to do that preparation. Reach out to a National Lifeguard instructor at your facility if you have a home facility, or reach out to me if you do have questions about what to expect. Make sure you get yourself registered for a recertification well in advance, so you're not frantically looking for one or looking to register for one too close to your actual expiry date. So I have scheduled my recertification for September 14th. I don't expire, I believe, for another 6 or 8 weeks after that. So if something were to happen and the recertification is canceled, or I get sick and I'm unable to attend, my livelihood is not jeopardized by my inability to work as a National Lifeguard instructor, where I have to hold the National Lifeguard Award, or for those of you still working as guards on pool decks, it would be very important that your NL award has not expired. As you get closer to your actual recertification, very rudimentary things such as ensuring that you get a good night's sleep, ensuring that you have proper nutrition the night before your recertification and the day of your recertification, minimizing your personal stress or anxiety by not doubling up too many activities, work appointments, or scheduled work before and after your recertification, making sure you arrive to the site early and that you're familiar with the facility if you've never been there before. You know the length of the pool, the depth of the pool, and what you can expect in terms of how the activities will be conducted. If you have any specific questions or personal accommodations in terms of medical conditions or allergies, you would reach out to that facility that is offering that course well in advance. If there is not a National Lifeguard instructor already assigned to the recertification, then contacting the facility so that the programmer or facility staff can assign that instructor and notify them of your concerns. Some other general questions I get about the National Lifeguard recertification: do you have to do it before you expire? No. In Alberta, the National Lifeguard Award is considered a lifetime award. So you can allow any length of time to pass between the time you expire and the time you recertify. The thing to keep in mind if you're not working in aquatics or you're not working as a lifeguard day to day is that the further away that you get from your original course, the harder it may be to remember the key concepts that you learned in the course. And so you certainly don't want to get to a place 3 or 4 or 5 years later where you feel like you need to retake the entire course. If you don't work in pools day to day, it may be appropriate to see if you can connect with your local facility about shadowing a lifeguard for a few hours at their job, to see if you can talk to somebody who's working as a lifeguard about their roles and responsibilities at their job. Each National Lifeguard instructor may teach the key core pieces of the lesson plan differently, but it is important to know that you lose the information that you don't use. And so it's often the case that after 4, 5, or 6 years, somebody may decide a recertification is not appropriate for me. I do need to retake the entire class. The other consideration can be that first aid is not concurrent with National Lifeguard. First aid here in Alberta is every 3 years for a full course, whereas your lifeguard certificate is expiring every 2 years. So if it has been a while since you took your first aid training, you may find it beneficial to retake a first aid recertification or first aid course to brush up on the key knowledge that you were expected to have when you come into a National Lifeguard pool recertification. The 4-hour recertification is an advantage here in Alberta for lifeguards who are effective at their jobs, who are knowledgeable and prepared, but it is definitely a challenge for people who come to the recertification because we don't have the time to reteach concepts that we may be able to review or cover in an 8-hour National Lifeguard pool recertification, as was the case when I lived and worked in Ontario. There was more time built in to allow for more review and more practice, whereas in a 4-hour recertification, you are really, really on a tight schedule particularly if you have 8, 10, 12 candidates. Each candidate may only get 1, maybe 2 attempts at a skill, and it is expected that you have prepared yourself to come to this course and be successful, to simply showcase or demonstrate your skills to the National Lifeguard Instructor, who can assess it to the standards in the award guide and then mark it off as complete. So the last piece I want to talk about in this video is what I am doing to personally prepare for my National Lifeguard Pool recert coming up in 2 months. As I mentioned, I need to make an effort to go to the pool at least once per week, every week, and swim 600, 700, 800 meters to ensure that I am fit enough. My goal is to have an endurance swim time of 8 minutes and 20 seconds. That's not particularly fast, but it's not particularly slow either, given that I'm in my late 30s and I've been doing this for a long time. I am naturally slower than I would have been at a recertification 10 or 12 years ago. And I'm comfortable with that personally because I don't work on a pool deck day to day as a lifeguard. I would have higher standards for myself if I was actively lifeguarding at a pool 4 or 5 days a week and actively working in an aquatic environment. For a lot of you, you know that my lifestyle is pretty sedentary. I do a lot of meetings on Zoom, a lot of teaching on Zoom. I do go in person to facilities, but it is a completely different environment than before the pandemic when I was managing a municipal pool and walking around the building all day long, interacting with customers and staff. Other key things that I have done to be successful on my National Lifeguard Pool recert coming up, I booked it well in advance. So I booked it with a facility that I know that I find that the schedule they were offering was convenient to my schedule. So I booked it at the beginning of the year. I've had it on my calendar for 9 months. I knew it was coming. I knew I had to start swimming during the summer. And I made sure to brush up on my content knowledge when it comes to first aid when I have been teaching courses. So that is one advantage that I have as a National Lifeguard Instructor. I don't feel like I personally need to review the scanning and observation lessons or the management of different types of victim lessons and performance criteria, because that happens naturally when I teach a course. I taught a National Lifeguard original course in March of 2024, as well as June of 2024. I have also taught National Lifeguard Instructor clinics recently, one back in February. So I spent 16, 20, 40 hours on this curricula content already, and it's pretty ingrained in my mind at this point over the last 10 years, except for the program changes that occurred in 2022. Other things I'm doing to prepare for my National Lifeguard recert include I set a benchmark at the beginning of the summer, my first time going out to the pool to swim. I set a timer on my Fitbit to measure exactly the 400-meter swim and to benchmark exactly where I was in terms of swimming. And it really wasn't that bad. I was just over 9 minutes as somebody who hadn't been swimming laps all during the winter. I didn't have that far to come. This is a little bit different compared to during the pandemic, 2020. I hadn't been swimming in 8, 9, 10 months, and my recertification was coming up. My first benchmark back into the pool was about 10 minutes and 20 seconds, which might not seem that far off the standard, but was abysmal for my own personal health and wellness, given that I've said already, I'm kind of an 8:20, 8:10 gal. And then earlier in my career, I was more of a 7:20, 7:30 person. So now I know what I need to work on to get myself down to the number that I would like to see at that recert in September. But I'm also chipping away at it over the summer in combination with everything else I've got going on in my life. Here is to reassure you, if you are preparing for your first National Lifeguard Pool recertification and you don't know what to expect, it is not meant to be a secret. It's not meant to be scary or stressful. There are very clear resources that you can access in terms of the recertification guide, in terms of talking to National Lifeguard instructors, asking to see their award guide, asking to see their lesson plans, asking for help if you're not sure what to expect. If you don't have a National Lifeguard instructor at your pool, it is very likely the case that your programmer or head guard or pool manager is aware of the NL pool physical standards and can assist you in preparing to meet them, even if they are not themselves certified as an NLI. If you have any other questions or if you have any suggestions for things that I have missed that can help you to prepare for your National Lifeguard recert, please pop them in the comments below. We know what has worked for you to prepare for these recertifications. Do you find them stressful? Do you find them routine and easy at this point? Do you find it harder to stay in shape as you get older, the longer you've been doing this? Let me know in the comments below your thoughts. I appreciate you being here with me, and we'll catch you in the next video.